Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 48th Nobel Conference on our global ocean. Here, near the geographic center of North America, which is just a little west of here in North Dakota, actually, far from any saltwater shore, we have convened a scientific conference to examine and discuss the nature and fate of the oceans of the Earth. And while this location might seem unlikely, that impression is superficial, since the Earth's oceans have a massive influence on the well-being and on the very existence of all of humankind, no matter where on the planet humans are located, and also on the complex, elegant biosphere, that thin layer of life of which we are all a part. We seek the oceans out, love to be near them, love to be on them and in them, and their water has always been essential for our existence. The oceans are, in many ways, us. Humankind, in turn, has had and continues to have a massive reciprocal impact on the oceans. We use the oceans for transportation, commerce, and military actions, and we mine them for food with little long-range thought about the physical consequences of those actions. We add materials, cast-off manufactured goods, carbon dioxide, and other waste to the oceans with little long-range thought about the physical consequences of those actions. We depend intimately, yet mostly unconsciously, on the oceans for regulations of the Earth's climate. The ability of water to absorb or release large quantities of heat is one physical property that allows life to exist here in this odd corner of our solar system. Despite these strong mutual influences, knowledge of the biology, geology, and chemistry of the oceans is pitifully poor at this point in human history, so an enormous amount remains to be learned. Our speaker this morning, Dr. David Gallo, has said, "Today we've only explored about 3% of what's out there in the ocean. Already we've found the world's highest mountains, the world's deepest valleys, underwater lakes, underwater waterfalls. There's still 97%, and either that 97% is empty or just full of surprises." Dr. David Gallo has dedicated his career to expansion of fundamental knowledge of the oceans, delineating the complex relationships between humanity and the oceans, and communicating the wonder of ocean exploration and discovery to the general public. Dr. Gallo has been highly active in oceanic exploration and has pioneered the use of advanced technologies such as manned submersibles and robots to explore formerly inaccessible regions of oceans around the world. His expeditions include collaboration with Robert Ballard in the discovery of the wrecks of the Titanic and of the Bismarck, discovery of new deep ocean communities of life that derive energy not from the sun, but from hydrothermal vent heat and chemistry, and numerous other expeditions that span the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans and the Mediterranean Sea. His passion for exploration and scientific understanding of the oceans has been widely communicated through many public media venues, including the Discovery Channel, History Channel, National Geographic, PBS, public radio, including an interview on NPR yesterday, and TED Talks. Dr. Gallo is Director of Special Projects at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. He received his bachelor's and master's degree in geological science from the State University of New York at Albany, and a Ph.D. in oceanography from the University of Rhode Island in 1987. Also in 1987, he was invited by Dr. Robert Ballard to join his team at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution as the Assistant Director for the Center for Marine Exploration. He was a major contributor to the development of the JASON project, the first LEGO League Ocean Odyssey, and Liquid Jungle Laboratory of Panama. He is the recipient of a Computer World Smithsonian Award and the John J. Conley Medal for communicating science to the public. Please welcome Dr. David Gallo.
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. Having worked so long at the bottom of the sea, I should be used to working under pressure, but a fantastic morning. Some little housekeeping. One, my allergies are having a blast with this dry fall, and my voice comes and goes, so I ask you to bear with it. Two, I'm not an academic thoroughbred or academic greyhound in a way. I grew up in central New York on the Finger Lakes, and like many people, didn't think all that much of the ocean. I mean, I knew that there were French guys with funny names wearing Speedos swimming around from Jacques Cousteau. But mostly I thought the oceans, like everything else, had been explored, that we were looking toward space at the time. I'm 60 years old, I'll save you the math, so grew up during the space race, and yes, I wanted to be an astronaut. Wasn't the best student. I have ADD. I like to think sometimes I'm the Dave Gallo Ph.D. ADD or ADD Ph.D. So I had a tough time in elementary school and high school. Most of all, I had a hard time reading, still do. I'm very jealous of people that can enjoy books. I've got a nonverbal learning disability, something like that. Add that to the title too. But there's one book that as a child I read 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. It's a story about Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl and his team that sailed from South America to Easter Island. And there's something about that that captured my imagination. And I thought every explorer, again, died in the 1800s and everything had been done, but that story just grabbed me. I didn't go into, like my guidance counselors suggested, after school I worked more with my hands than with my mind. I sold shoes for quite a while. And 1976, I was standing behind a counter just like this in a shoe store, flipping through National Geographic magazine. And in there was an article by Bob Ballard, who had just come back from exploring in the Caribbean, a place called the Abyss. And I remember there was a hand-drawn picture, and on that hand-drawn picture, a little speck. The speck was the submarine, 3 people in there, and it described this incredible mystical world beneath the sea. And you know, it's not that I got suddenly smarter, but my curiosity got fired up again. I got direction. I was focused, and it wasn't very long after that, 2 years, I got my bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, and then my dream came full circle indeed when Bob Ballard asked me to join his team at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I've been there ever since for 25 some odd years. I do remember my first time on a major expedition with Bob Ballard, because I thought it can't get better than this. We were in the Mediterranean on a research ship. The sun was coming up over the eastern Mediterranean, the big orange ball. There was a National Geographic film crew here. And the producer said to me, he said, I have to ask you, what's it like to go from selling shoes to working with the best and the brightest? I'm thinking, oh no, that. And I said, well, actually, the same rule applies in both jobs. After the first 1,000 feet or so, both tasks get a lot tougher. It's true. Oh, no, thank you. I'm hoping what I can do today, first of all, you know, I'm one of many people, one of 1,000 from where I come from at Woods Hole, dedicated to understanding the oceans. And they're one of many places you're going to hear from many of my colleagues today that are all dedicated to exploring this planet. But my hope is that somewhere in this presentation, I'm going to share with you some of the things that really inspire me and that intrigue me. And maybe just like that article did to me back in 1976, there will be something in there that grabs your attention. I'll start with this. What a good place to start, the good old Earth. And you know, it's an amazing image for a couple of reasons. One, we weren't ever, nothing's written into our DNA that we should have the right to go out into outer space and look back on Earth and everything about our home planet, but there it is. We take it for granted very quickly. This is the latest from NASA of the big blue marble. And you know, taking it for granted, not such a good thing, and I think that's a common issue we have with the oceans. We really do take them for granted. The other thing it is that it makes it seem like we know everything that's going on. Surely, if you can see everything, the clouds, the ocean, the mountains, the cities and all the like, we must know what's going on, and we really don't. I mean, there's still an awful lot more to be done. At Woods Hole, we're more likely to look at the Earth like this. That's Google Earth picture of Earth, but it's from the Pacific side. You normally don't see that kind of an image because people that show you the Earth want to show you something, not just blue. But that's the Earth from the Pacific, and you'd be hard-pressed to find continent on there. You see the islands of Hawaii, up inside here, and then North America over here, a little bit of New Zealand down there, but by and large, mostly blue. Earth is 73% covered with ocean, average depth about 2.5 miles. So it's pretty deep, pretty vast. You're looking at about 10,000 miles in diameter, so it's quite a place. And indeed, we haven't explored a lot of what's been out there. Depending on what you call exploration, we changed that number from, we've looked at 10%, 6%, 5%. Depends on what you mean by exploration, but what we do find is amazing. I mean, already, and Dr. O'Brien mentioned it, there's a mountain range that goes all around the Earth. It's right here. It's called the Mid-Ocean Ridge. That's 50,000 miles long. It's got thousands of peaks on it, higher than most of the peaks in the Alps or in the Rocky Mountains. It's crisscrossed by thousands of valleys called fracture zones that many times wider and deeper and 1,000 times longer than the Grand Canyon. We find in it underwater rivers, and I'll show you something else that recently we found, not all too distant ago, is at the bottom of the ocean. Well, I gave it away already, but you see that puddle of water. There's a little puddle of water right here, and it looks like a white sandy beach, and over here is another beach and some rocks on the side. And in fact, if we get closer, you'll see a better view of that. It looks like a nighttime scene, and in fact, you can even see notches in the rocks and ripples in the water. This is at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, a place called Flower Garden Banks, and this is Bob Ballard and Noah and his team doing this research. But we can go to the bottom of the lake, and you'd be looking out the window of the submarine or through the robot, eyes of a robot, and look at another body of water at the bottom of the lake. It's just amazing. And so we find ponds, puddles, rivers, lakes at the bottom of the sea. So mountains, valleys, waterfalls. The greatest waterfall on the planet by some accounts is off the west coast of Iceland. It dwarfs Angel Falls by about 5 times higher than Angel Falls. All that stuff at the bottom of the sea, and it's all exploration. None of these things were really predicted, and in fact, in a place like this, I remember talking to the people that were in the submarine at the time when they were looking, and right away, this is super salty water. It's very odd chemically, and biologists would say, well, nothing can live in there, and the people on board the sub said, yeah, it's true, except for all the things we see swimming around inside there. But, fascinating places. Almost every time we go into the ocean, sometimes with new equipment, new cameras, new sonars, new sensors, we come back surprised, sometimes startled, and in other cases, we find something that's totally revolutionary in an instant of exploration. When I talk about exploration, I mean that ocean, once you get below 1,000 feet or so, eternally pitch black. Okay, it's a dark world. The sun's never been there. So when we turn those lights on or turn our sensors on, we're seeing things for the first time, and things that have been totally unpredicted. So we never know what to expect next. I just want to show you this because there's a current or a river flowing from lower left to upper right. You can see the little ripples in the sand. Oceanography, we have this duality, and actually in a way there's 3 reasons why we go out to sea, but the second one is because it's important to us. There's 7 billion people living on that planet. And no matter where you live on the planet, the oceans can reach out and touch you, and it does it through things like climate change, weather patterns, hurricanes, floods, droughts, tsunamis. All those things get their energy from the sea or the seafloor beneath it. By the same token, no matter where you live on this planet, you have an impact on the ocean. And it's not just the carbon dioxide we put in the air, and I suspect you're going to hear quite a bit about this today, that the carbon dioxide you put in the air is eventually a large portion of it absorbed by the ocean. But stuff we put on our ground, our football fields, our backyards, our farmlands, our golf courses, our city streets, all that stuff eventually makes its way into the sewers or the creeks, into the rivers, and then eventually makes its way out into the sea, and that stuff's turning out to be deadly, absolutely deadly. I don't like to speak in too emotional terms, but by some accounts that if you catch a fish from the middle of the ocean basins and look at the stomach contents, you have a real good chance of finding microbits of plastic. If you look at the flesh and blood, you'll find traces of our humanity there. You'll find flame retardants and pharmaceuticals and herbicides, pesticides, all the stuff that we think is wonderful for our everyday life. It helps us. It's the developed world. Turns out not so good for the ocean. And the scary part about that is we're getting to a point where we're starting to eat our own garbage. I can break all that stuff down, and it's very complicated. Nothing's simple on one level. On another level, it's very simple, that we count on the oceans for the air we breathe. About every other breath you take, you can thank the oceans for that oxygen. The food we eat, all sorts of ways food is tied into the oceans, and the water we drink. Boy, that's so important, that because rainfall patterns are controlled a lot by ocean patterns. And yet, despite all that stuff, 7 billion people, our lives in the balance, we depend on this ocean. We have an intimate relationship with the sea, its obstacles to our evolution, its pathways to evolution. We don't even know it. How can we begin to understand on this planet how to live better into the future if we don't even understand what's out there? We haven't done the very first step of exploring the ocean, let alone understanding how to deal with it. So much happens deep in the ocean. You can do so much from satellites, but we need to get in that ocean, into that 2 miles, to understand what's going on. You've been a real success when you make it as a joke in the New Yorker magazine. And this is mostly about the bottom of the ocean, and Maya's going to talk about how exciting the bottom is. I'm going to touch on it a little bit, but some ladies having coffee or tea, and I don't know why I don't care about the bottom of the ocean, but I don't, despite the stuff I just told you. That's the general feeling. We just don't think about it. We don't care about it. And I love this slogan. It's from McCann Erickson, an advertising firm, truth well told. As scientists, as explorers, what we're trying to do is reach as good as we can for the truth. We don't always quite get there because there's always something about the hypothesis that needs to be challenged or tested or changed. But that's the direction we're heading, and I think the public sometimes gets confused about that process. It's a normal part of science to criticize and to tear down and to build back up again. But we're doing good at that. We're doing good at that. The well-told part we have a problem with. Most often, I think it's because we rely heavily on the media. The media doesn't have time to sit there and understand exactly what the science is. So they tend to embellish things. They talk about islands the size of Texas of plastic in the Pacific. I don't know that there is an island the size. I've never seen a photo of an island the size of Texas of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. But they do that sometimes to get attention, to get headlines. And in the long run, when the public finds out that that's not exactly that way, you feel like you've been, had the wool pulled over your eyes a little bit. We need to get better at that. And just in the past couple of years, think of some of the things that did make headlines. The tsunami and following mess with the Fukushima nuclear plants in Japan. Ocean issue, could we have stopped it? No, but we could have known better what to expect from that. Deepwater Horizon, for months and months and months, we had what seemed like a monster loose. I show up on top, I show the ships in Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. On the bottom, this monster called the Kraken. Oh, thanks. The monster called the Kraken. And it's a mythical monster because to me, that's what it was. And oddly enough, that monster took the form of a leaky pipe. Here we were driving robots around Mars and we couldn't plug this pipe spewing oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The other thing was that we didn't know for the longest time what was coming out, how much was there, where was it going. And to make matters worse, almost seemingly to make things better, we added detergent, dispersants into that monster. We gave it venom. That's horrible stuff. Oil's bad enough in the short term. Dispersants, frightening. And we did that. And there's another message there is that if we don't get the facts right, we can love this planet to death. You can think you're doing the right thing and actually be doing the wrong thing. Ships, this ship is called the Derbyshire, sank in a typhoon some time ago. But every single year, about 10 of these go to the bottom. You don't normally hear about it because it's in the middle of no place. They've got relatively small crews, maybe 20 people. They're registered in Liberia. They're carrying ore or nothing extravagant or exotic. But rogue waves, typhoons take them to the bottom. And now more than ever, we're being asked to go find these ships and help understand why they sank. That's good for the shipbuilders, good for the environment, and helps the families of the crews get some closure. More recently, you know about this, and the reason I show this is because Costa Concordia, we lost about 35 lives on Costa Concordia. It had twice as many passengers on board as Titanic. It's a bigger ship than Titanic. Had it moved off to the right a little bit and slid off those rocks and capsized, would have been a bigger disaster than Titanic. I call this lecture Beyond Titanic, and I'm going to give you a dose of Titanic, and we will get beyond it, I promise. We can learn a lot from Titanic. One is, that's a picture of Titanic that on Bob Ballard's book. It's not a picture that we took with our great submarines or robots or cameras or sonars. We didn't have the technology to take that photo. Because at the bottom of the sea, you can see up here how little, if you look at that robot here, how little that robot actually can light up. It's a very small area. So if we wanted to have that whole bow, it would take hundreds of images, and we didn't have the capability of doing that back then. Ken Marshall, the artist, unbelievable. You know, and this is now 86, still Ken is producing these absolutely artistic images of the seafloor that are just staggering. That's why I show this. It's not that we didn't know what Titanic looked like. We followed it all along through its building. There it was in Belfast, and here it is being fitted out. And the wonderful part about these images is that as someone that's been to Titanic and that's making maps of it, we get to know every one of those plates. We get to know the anchors, what they look like before the ship sank, and that's a pretty powerful thing. Not something that science ever promises you. So in a way, we take the mystery. We knew what we were looking for, but it's great to be able to go back in history and match things together. As I got involved in this, I didn't really want to get so involved in Titanic. It wasn't really my thrust of my own personal research, but I did. So I led the last expedition in 2010 as a favor to a friend that couldn't make the trip. And so I started to learn more about it. And the thing was that we have to remember was how vast the oceans are. And back then, this was the way you went from North America to Europe and back again. So it was all about steamships. And Titanic back then was nothing special. It was one of three sister ships, the Olympic on top, the Titanic in the middle, and the Britannic on the bottom. And the Olympic lived a long life, ended up going to a scrapyard. Titanic in the middle, well, we know what happened there. And the Britannic on the bottom eventually, during World War I, hit a mine off the coast of Greece and sank. We're actually working on Britannic right now. On the right side is Olympic and Titanic being fitted out again, and there they are, ready to go, side by side. So nothing special about that ship. Olympic got all the attention back then. The last image of Titanic, it dropped off passengers that went from England to France, picked up some, dropped off some, France to Ireland, same thing, and off it went. This is the last picture of Titanic afloat, heading off into the dark of night. And then this happened, another image from Ken Marshall. The thing that's amazing to me was, you know, all the ideas that, well, they said they were unsinkable, they really didn't. They were going too fast, they really weren't. They didn't have enough lifeboats, they really did. The idea of lifeboats back then was not that everyone gets in a lifeboat and rows to Canada. The idea of lifeboats was that there are so many ships going from North America to Europe that you transfer. If you're in trouble, stop your ship, another ship or two will come alongside, then you use the lifeboats to transfer passengers, so they did that. They were cautious. They had two lookouts up here in the crow's nest that night. The sad thing was they came so close from the work we did, and I was on Jim Cameron's roundtable about this too, and for 3 days he tortured us about Titanic to try to make sure he got the movie right. He's very interested in that. But they came so close it had to be less than a foot, that if they had moved just a little bit, a foot to the left, to the port side, they may have survived this altogether, and Titanic, you would never hear the name again. But as it was, that iceberg just bumped along the side. And even upstairs, the upper decks, as passengers sat there drinking their drinks and coffee and whatnot, down below, right now, already people were fighting for their lives and to save the ship. And I say this again because it's important to remember how we've transitioned from how important the oceans were, that then it was steamships, today it's airliners. You have to remember, too, that the technology from the bridge to the stern of that ship, 800 some odd feet, and there were no walkie-talkies, there were no loudspeakers, so when the captain gave an order, that had to go by word of mouth all the way down the length of the ship, and then all the way down many decks down deep into the bowels of the ship. So the chances, especially with the ship sinking, a brand new crew, they've only been at sea a couple of days, the chances of that order being accurate by the time it got back and down were very slim. And in fact, one of the most interesting things to me was the order was women and children first, but it was misinterpreted to be women and children only. So many men that night actually died because they were told, even though the lifeboats were half empty, you can't get in because it's women and children only. Even the richest guy on board, Colonel Astor, died that night. He walked his pregnant wife to a lifeboat, asked if he could join her. There were about 40 empty seats, no one else around. And they said, no, sir, women and children only. The other thing was that you see this boat in the foreground is heading off toward you in the audience. That's because the captain said, have them row for that light over there. He pointed off to the port side. There was a boat somewhere right there between the horizon. and we think that boat was the Californian. So still plenty to learn from Titanic. And you know, this is the ship we used the last time, and it's an, I would say classic. Another way I would say would be old. Old, even when Jacques Cousteau was around, it was getting old. But it's a classic French research vessel. But on board that vessel, and this is a common theme with oceanography, we brought some of the newest technology. As I said in the beginning, ocean's 2.5 miles deep on average, so it's all about technology to get there, to stay there, to see, to explore. We had two kinds of robots. One was an ROV, remotely operated vehicle, and any kid that can drive a video game could drive one of these robots. So it's tethered to the ship by a cable. It's got on the front of it 3D cameras. It's got all sorts of cameras and sensors, and it goes to the bottom 24 hours a day, live Titanic back on the surface ship. So on the surface ship, we have an incredible viewing room up there of monitors and a team driving that robot around. The beauty of that is that with a satellite link, you could even sit here in this audience and drive around a ship in the Mediterranean or a coral reef or whatever with a satellite link. We can do that now. The other kind of robot we had was these things. These are brand new. They're called autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. So instead of being tethered to the ship, we turn them loose, tell them what we want them to do. Off they went into the night, and back they came with these wonderful maps of Titanic. Now, the mission here was not to be tourists and not to make a documentary film. Normally, what people do when they go to Titanic, you go to the bow, you go to the bridge, you look at the propellers, you look at a couple of portholes, the grand staircase. That's it. I'm out of here, because those are all the highlights. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to map the entire site way beyond the wreck of Titanic. It's broken in two pieces, the bow and the stern. They're separated by about 6 football fields. So we wanted to map everything in between. We wanted to map the hulls themselves, but we also wanted to map out into the seafloor because we wanted to put Titanic in the context of the deep sea. So that's what these vehicles did. And with the other robot, the ROV, if we wanted to, it was just like, so this was like plowing a field with these robots. Just go 10 miles that way, turn around, move over 50 feet, 10 miles back and forth, always making maps with cameras and sonars. With the other vehicles, we wanted to move along the hull and across the top of the hull, just like you're painting a house in the most, or a room in the most ordered way, taking snapshot after snapshot after snapshot and video so we could stitch it all together to make the whole hull of Titanic. We promised each other that when we get there this time, we're not going to see some animal and then take the robot and get all excited and go chase this animal off into the dock. You can tell what's coming. It lasted for about 5 minutes. As soon as we were coming up the Titanic, we landed on the bottom, started moving toward the hull. The sonar operator said 50 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet coming into range. And right then, some large, wonderful, beautiful animal just scooted out in front of the robot. And we were so tempted to follow, but we didn't. We stuck to our game plan. So I just want to show you a couple of things about why Titanic is so Titanic. These are the boilers. Here's a gentleman sitting here. That's a guy standing next to the boilers. This is what it looks like at the bottom of the sea. Not much to you, but there's about 40 images to make that one image of that boiler. The engines, again, there's a gentleman standing right here, I think 5 stories tall or so. And here's what they look like at the bottom of the ocean. And the beauty is that here there's hundreds of images, but we were able to get the whole width of Titanic. That's the actual keel of Titanic here, so that's the hull of Titanic from side to side. This is big enough to put a freight train through. And because these are so high resolution, we can actually zoom in on any given part of those engines that we want to take a closer look. Same thing with the stern of Titanic, the propellers. You can see the gentleman standing down here. This is what it looks like beneath the sea. Here's the stern, and one of the propellers here, another propeller here. On this image, you can't make it out, but the words Titanic are back here, and the rudder, of course, right here. So I'm going to cheat again. We're working on putting all that together, and the goal is this. That's the stern of Titanic, and the stern is a mangled mess. The bow, if you remember Jim Cameron's movie, so they hit the iceberg up near the bow fills up with water. Eventually, it starts to lift the ship up out of the water, and the stress is so great, bang, the ship breaks in half, the bow goes to the bottom. Full of water, no air pockets, there's nothing for the ocean to crush, and the bow plows into the seafloor. The stern, if you remember Jack and Rose grabbed onto the back of the stern, So the stern bobbed around for a while and then eventually tipped up, had a lot of air pockets in it, started to go underwater, and the ocean just took that stern, that massive human-made ship, and tore it up like confetti and threw those pieces all over the seafloor. And that's what you see here. That's the stern of the ship. The actual back is here. These are those engines we looked at up here. But this is Ken Marshall at his wizardry again, being able to put this together. We're getting good, Ken Marshall, wherever you are. So pretty soon we'll have this, it'll start looking like the real deal. This is the bow. And I show you this because you see the difference. The bow's in pretty good shape considering. This is not the iceberg damage. This is when it hit the seafloor at about 20 to 30 miles an hour. We see the same hole on the other side of Titanic. But this right here, we think is iceberg damage. That tiny little fold in the hull is from where the ice just pressed against. It wasn't like a can opener that stuck into the hull and ripped the metal. It was just pushing seams apart. What we want to be able to do is to make virtual Titanic. We want to make virtual coral reefs. We want to make virtual underwater mountains, so that it's so much of this is about experience. It's about being in the sub, being in scuba gear, snorkeling, operating an ROV, that we can share part of that with these virtual worlds through platforms like Xbox or PlayStation or computers. We can do it. We know we can do it. So that's one of our huge goals, so we can share this with a global audience and have it a learning. We don't want people shooting each other while they're down there, but it's not like a real video game, but it will be virtual exploration. That was the old way of traveling across the Atlantic. Then there's this, and I want to show you this for one reason. This is Air France Flight 447. The sad part of this, the modern day of crossing the Atlantic, was that we're usually told planes don't fall out of the air. This one did on June 1st, 2009, with 228 lives lost. And I see that I need to upgrade the slide because it disappeared right over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was going from Rio to Paris along this line over the tip of Brazil, and right here disappeared from sight. There were planes ahead of it, planes behind it. There was no radar coverage, but it was gone, just dropped out of sight. There was about a 4-minute burst of information to headquarters back in Paris saying that there was some trouble on board the plane, but nowhere in there did it say exactly what that was or where the plane was. And so it came down somewhere around the top of that underwater mountain range that I mentioned to you. We've never explored this part of that mountain range. The topography is easily as rugged as the Rocky Mountains. It's at about 3 miles deep, 2.5 to 3 miles deep. And the mission was, in order to find out what happened to that plane, we had to find 2 of these flight recorders on the right. We call them black boxes. They're orange, obviously. But the mission was to find those. So it was akin to going to the Rocky Mountains and trying to find 2 shoe boxes at night with a flashlight. So for the most part, people thought, never going to happen. We're never going to find it. And the French, God bless them, they were out there with everything they had. They threw at that issue right away. They didn't have the time to think about where to look or a strategy, but they did look. And it was about 5 days after the plane crashed that they found bits of the plane on the seafloor. There's a bit of a Gallo, you'll recognize that. That was the tail fin before. And then at the end of about a week's time, they compiled all of these bits of the plane. And the trick was, okay, these have been floating around for a week. Where did they come from? Where was that X? And to us, it was, let's find the haystack, we'll find the needle. Because actually, with a magnet, you can find the bits of a needle in a haystack. It's not so hard anymore. And it took a while to get the confidence of the families of the lost souls on that plane. It took a bit of time to get the confidence of the French and Brazilian governments, but we did. And this is the search area, this big round. It's an immense area. It's about 80 miles in diameter. This is the last known position. And we spent, I won't call it a wild goose chase, but we spent 2 months looking in a place where the plane turned out not to be. And then we spent about 1 week looking down here where the plane turned out to be. A very simple thing again, technology. We had a simple ship with 2 of those. We had 2 of these. These are those torpedo-shaped robots. That's what the plane looks like on the seafloor. It's about 2 football fields by 6 football fields. And then when we tell the robots, that's an image made with sound, then we tell the robots, go back and take a picture. We want to be sure what we're looking at. This is what came back. A very tough emotional moment at sea because you want to celebrate. You found what you're looking for at the same time, not the thing to celebrate. So you get torn a little bit. Even with Titanic today, even after 100 years that it's been underwater, you can tell when something emotional is on the screen because everything stops. The buzz stops, the murmuring. It could be in Titanic, a doll, a child's doll, a pair of shoes next to a dress. There's always something that, you know, we try to make believe science is this non-emotional thing, but when you're working with the ocean, it's emotion. It's a passion that runs deep in all of us that explore the ocean. Bottom line was, no pun intended, there they are. The two things on the upper left, that's one recorder, and on the right. So thankfully, with the right technology, and given the confidence to go out there and look, we did do the impossible and found those things, but it was a team effort. It wasn't one person or one institution. It was an international effort to do that, which gave me and others confidence that I don't think that there's anything anymore, no plane wreck, no shipwreck, no spot on the ocean beyond our reach. If we decide that there's something we need to know, whether it's something about the Earth's climate, which is in the Earth's sediments, something about earthquakes and tsunamis, a plane wreck, a ship sinking, there's nothing we can't get at given the right support and confidence of humanity. Technology, and this is just one smattering of one bit of Woods Hole. Other places have got their own technology. You can't go to Avis and Hertz and say, I want to rent a robot or a submarine to go to the bottom of the ocean. We have engineers that build it. So, and that's a huge component of what we do at Woods Hole. We have scientists asking questions, engineers building the systems to go out and get the answers to those questions, and we collaborate freely globally. But something we don't talk about much is this, is that it's not just the toys, it's also the camaraderie, it's the teamwork, it's the talent, and in this case, it's the mentorship. On the right, Billy Lang, who's been there forever like me, and on the left, Evan Kovacs, a young, bright optic. These guys build the best cameras on Earth. Here, on either side of this young guy, Kevin Manganini, who's in his early 20s, you have two old salts, Mark Dennett and Mike Desner. It's how to do it, how do we do things, what mistakes have we made? I can't begin to tell you how powerful this is. The other thing is that these are the heroes. You know, I get to have the pleasure of standing here in front of you and getting the applause if there is one, and have the honor of being here, but these are the heroes. You never hear their names, but these are the guys, and I made a big mistake. Women too. You know, I only showed you men. Women, we have submarine pilots, robot pilots, engineers, scientists, women very important and taking leadership roles out at sea. And sadly, I'm going to, from now on, put a slide of some of the women that go to sea too. But so these are the heroes, and that's something that gets lost, how important that mentorship and teamwork. It's just like a symphony orchestra. You can have the best, instruments on Earth, but if you don't have the talent and if they're not working together, it all somehow falls apart. And then you have to have a philosophy, and for that I rely on the infamous philosopher Yogi Berra, who said you can observe a lot just by watching, and good old Yogi is exactly right. And so I'm going to now talk about, so far I talked about Titanic, Air France, ships, you know, things that we are aware of that went to the bottom. We needed to go. For the climate stuff, we have to go in a way. We should go. But here's things that we want to go because we exploring the deep. And technology, you have to start with a ship depending on where you're working. This is our ship Atlantis. That's the submarine pilot looking out the front of the sub. The sub holds 3 people. It's in many ways very medieval. They hate it, the pilots, when I talk about that because you're really in a titanium sphere that you put weights on, put it in the water, add a little bit of ballast water to it, and down you go. But very powerful. You know, it's not exactly a space shuttle launch, but in many ways so exciting. And if you're there in the sub, one of the things you think about right now is, should I have gone to the bathroom one more time? Because it's about a 10-hour day. But no matter how many times you dive, right here, everything starts to change. Whole different story. You're leaving the world of sun behind. The sound of the surface ship, all the machinery goes away. You start to feel the rolling of the ocean, the pinging of the sonar. The divers check out the sub, you're good to go, and then down you go. And it's about a 2.5-hour commute down through the water, through that blanket of water to the bottom. And it's amazing. You know, you go from light Jacques Cousteau blue or dentist office blue, down through deep blue, dark blue, then pitch black for about 2 hours. And, you know, it's a world that we thought there'd be no life in, because no sun, no life, and anyone will tell you on the way to the bottom, especially in the shallow water, then you get in the deep water, different animals, full of life. And some of the most incredible creatures, like this guy, siphonophore, I call it a jellyfish because I'm a geologist, but it's got all these working pieces. It's got these fishing lures down here, stinging tentacles, Little jet thrusters, a light in its head. Fully grown can be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet long. So it's an amazing animal. Same thing with these beautiful jellies. And we study the motions, we study what they eat, what eats them, how do they avoid being eaten, how do they trap what they want to eat. The thing is, in the past, you would tow a net through this world, a net over the side, pull the net through, and after a few hours, bring the net up, and then you'd try to put these animals back together, get in your own mind, trying to guess what they would be using a microscope and the like. But now today, with the technology, you can get in the water with them and actually have a look at how beautiful they are, where they live. Some of these are caught by divers, and we photograph them in tanks, but in the deep ocean, we can now stop and look. And again, if we know what we want to get, what are we after? We have the talent and the drive and the tools to be able to go get it. Now here we're actually looking very close up at one of the jellies. I love this guy because, especially since school kids, it's a little octopus, named him Squishy, and it's what an adequate name. And the best part, I think, is that you can see through his, you can kind of see through his head to his other fins on either side of his head. But a voracious little predator that guy is. Back to my thing that I said we'd leave behind, but when you get to the seafloor, you have the record of human history and Earth history. The sediments on the bottom of the sea, you have climate change information in the sediments, but also big lumps of human history like Titanic. And I showed you a lot of stills of Titanic, but we did get good with video. There's where Jack was king of the world right there. And we want to understand about Titanic. How long has it been, will it be around? It's an icon of the deep. Here we are sitting on the deck looking at the anchor chains. It hit the iceberg just off to the right. Is it going to be around another 10 years, 25 years, 50 years? That's not something for Woods Hole to decide to leave things there or pick them up, but we do want to have some idea how long things like this last on the seafloor. It's become home to a whole community of animals. There's microbes that are actually eating it. Not this, though. Oddly enough, that's the pedestal where the steering wheel would have gone, and it's got the forward-reverse arrow on it. That's got copper in it, so nothing's eating that. But there's a lot of things in here. The Marconi machine and the SOS was sent from. There's a Rubaiyat of Omai Khayyam somewhere in this jewel-encrusted book. Do we leave them sitting on the seafloor, or do we recover them for posterity? What's the best thing to do? Again, not something Woods Hole does. Our job is to go out and get the facts. How long will this thing be around? The other thing is the emotional side, is that when this sank, we committed the ship and souls for eternity to the deep. We commit the ship and souls for eternity to the deep. And now guess what? Here we are. So is this eternity? How do we treat this world that we stumble into? With what kind of respect do we treat it? And it's something we think about all the time when we're working around a shipwreck like Titanic. The hull's one thing, but looking on the seafloor around the Titanic, there's a bazillion things that fell off the ship, and so we've been cataloging that too. We want to know every single cup and saucer. That's a piece of a bench that was on the deck. There's all sorts of animals walking around out there. We want to know what they are. When we looked off the side of Titanic, we found fields of sediment dunes that were larger. They dwarfed the hull of Titanic. We had no idea they even existed in the deep sea. There's some cable, there's lights, there's a barrel that something came out of. And like I said, every so often when you're on that surface ship, 24/7, these images are coming, and there's something that stops everything. And this is one of those things that one night the camera focused on this, and as you get closer, you see it's a teacup. And on the bottom of that cup, you can see the White Star logo, and then it says White Star Line. So we're getting good at that. Again, something we knew was down there. It was just a matter of understanding what happened to it, where is it, what's the disposition. Here's something we didn't understand, and Maya's going to talk more about this in a bit. Along the top of that mountain range, we have hot water coming out. It's all volcanic, and the seawater gets down into cracks, and the seafloor comes shooting out at hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit, up to 500-600 degrees Fahrenheit. Toxic as all get out. You couldn't get a permit to dump that in the ocean if you tried. So a really rotten egg, stinky smelling stuff. By all accounts, it's so deep, a couple miles deep. The pressure is enough, it would crush the Titanic like you saw. Poisonous fluids, constant earthquakes, volcanoes. No sunlight ever, so there's positively not going to be any life in that area to speak of. Maybe a worm or two here or there, but there's no food source. And guess what? Some geologists stumbling around looking at volcanic rocks came across immense amounts of life. Called hydrothermal vent communities, and that's what you see here. This is a pillar of life that's tens of feet tall, and everything you see on there is a living organism. and all very bizarre. There's worms called tube worms. They can be 3, 5, 7 feet long. There's crabs, there's clams, there's shrimp, there's mussels. So all these animals living where we said robust communities of life with a diversity and density that actually could rival the tropical rainforest in a place we said no life at all. And all living there together in the darkness. In fact, you'll see, like there's a crab here. He's going to try to get that little tube worm lunch in a moment. Go for it, buddy. No, not again. So these are places that we've known about them and been visiting them for a couple of decades now, but we still haven't had enough time to really understand how important they are. But in finding these, totally revolutionized the way we think about life on Earth and other planets, because these life communities, at least the basis of it, are living off chemical energy coming inside the Earth out. Chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis, outside the Earth down. So really amazing that in one moment, never predicted of exploration, you can revolutionize something as profound as life on the ocean. So, you know, there's a lot to be done. So what's left to be found beyond Titanic? Plenty. You know, plenty. We need to understand those mountains, those valleys, those waterfalls are all important to how the oceans work. This is a planet that's been changing for 5 billion years, and it changes two ways. One is through climate change, and the other one is through plate tectonics. So the face of the Earth is always changing. And so much of it is wrapped up in our own existence. You know, 7 billion people heading towards 9. Most of us live within what we call the coastal zone. Everybody impacted by the ocean, everybody impacting the ocean. We owe it to ourselves and to the ocean to understand our relationship better. During the daytime, you can't see humanity from space. You know, it's almost like we're a bacteria. If you put everybody together on the planet, I keep saying this, I think it's fascinating, no one else does. If you get, maybe because I spend so much time on planes, if you give everybody an airline seat, it's about 12 cubic feet. You can put 7 billion people in a box that's a mile by a mile by a mile. A tiny box, a mile by a mile by a mile. You would never see that box on this map. So everybody fits in there. So we're almost like a virus on this planet, and because of our activities, we have managed to change the chemistry and temperature of the oceans. We have. That's the simple matter of it all. You know, and the good news is that now we know. We always thought the ocean's too vast, too deep. And part of it is that we don't see ourselves on here. But you know, at nighttime, just like the deep ocean animals, the Earth lights up. And this is from WorldSat International. It's a beautiful image called the night sky, they call it. And I want to just step through those lights quickly. There's North America, the lights of civilization, if you want to put it that way, or the developed world. Those are the white lights. And I think, let's see, I hope I get it right. Are we right around there someplace? Right around there. I'll get rid of it just in case we're not. Europe, and the beauty of Europe, here's Italy down here, Spain. You can see the lights are outlining it. The red dots are the brightest things on Earth when you're in space. Actually, my neighbor, Sunny Williams, is the commander of the space station right now. She's up there spinning around space, and she confirms this, that these gas flares are brilliant at night. Here's the North Sea, Siberia, Persian Gulf. This little white thing here is the Nile River, one of the most densely populated places on Earth. So that's Europe, developed white lights. The islands of Japan over inside here. Korea over here, South Korea, lots of white lights. North Korea, guess what? Not many. Pyongyang right there is the capital. But these blue clouds, these blue clouds, those are all fishing fleets. You know, we've done a good job. It's almost like we're waging war on life in the sea. With our fishing fleets, we're sending them out. We find fish, out you go, catch them, kill them, bring them in. And we've done a good job. And I'm sure Barbara's going to talk, Barbara Block, Dr. Block's going to talk about that later on, I'm sure. At the same time, so that's an action we're doing. At the same time, the steady trickle of stuff is that we're slowly changing the chemistry and temperature of the sea through carbon dioxide and our runoff from our land. So we're actually, like if it's an aquarium, we're changing the temperature and the chemistry, and guess what? You know what happens when you do that. Life doesn't like it too much. It has to change. This is the image that I really find most fascinating, though, because it's Africa, and up here is the Sahara. Not a lot going on. There's some oil exploration in Libya and Tunisia and the like. Down here in Nigeria, the Nile River Valley. But these gold dots, those gold dots right there, those are all village fires. Villages burning solids for their cooking and for light and all the like. And from here on up through Middle East and China into China, there's about 1.5 billion people that don't have adequate, something that we take for granted, fresh water. For sanitation, for drinking, for farming, they just don't. And so it started to bug us about how can we be living with Dave on an ocean planet with all this ocean water, and yet a big chunk of humanity is clinging to life. I mean, it's a serious thing over there. And so we took all the water off the Earth and had a look at it. The Earth on the left with no water on it. We take all the water off it, that's it, by volume right there. So if the Earth was the size of a basketball, all the water fits into a ping pong ball. Imagine that, taking a ping pong ball full of water, and to make the Earth's oceans on a basketball, you have to smear that water on the basketball. It's hardly any water at all. You say, how could that be? Well, I said the average depth is about 2.5 miles. That's about 4,000 miles. The Pacific's about 12,000 miles. So imagine a layer that's 12,000 miles across, that's the Pacific Ocean, but the average depth is 2. Now to us, the little microorganisms, it's a lot of ocean. To the planet, it's thinner than the frost on a glass. So that's all the water right there on the whole planet. Fresh water, and the Earth only makes so much, about 80% comes from the ocean, is that little speck right there. So, and actually that's bigger than it really is, because that's the smallest speck our graphics people could draw so you could see it. So for us to live the way we like to live, you have to take that little speck of water, and it has to go in just the right places, in just the right amounts, at just the right time of year, or we and life like us, we don't like that very much when you start to mess with those cycles. And that's what we see going on in the US. That's what we see going on globally. If you want to be shocked, just go to Google and put in a Google alert so that you get an alert every time there's some news about it, water crisis. And your computer will light up every day with water crises all over the Earth. In the Midwest, from here down to California, Phoenix especially, Vegas, the future looks pretty grim. You know, it doesn't look good. And the good news in that is that by understanding ocean patterns, we can at least get ahead of understanding the cycles from the ocean and try to relate that to what happens on land. And by doing that, we can be better prepared. We can learn to adapt. Humanity's always had a great ability to adapt if we know what's coming next. I like to show this because it always makes me feel bad for my meteorologist friends. But this is the, every day is going by about this fast. And this is 1995, so it's a long time ago. It's water vapor. I wanted to show you this because even when there's clear sky, like it was earlier today, there's still water vapor up there. Most of that water vapor, that humidity is coming out of the ocean, and it's all connected. Hurricanes, we know about how hurricanes can move water and wind and energy, and this is Katrina, but what I want to show you is the orange is warm water, blue is cold water. Watch when these hurricanes, especially Katrina, here it comes in a moment, there it is. Watch when it moves over the Gulf, how it sucks up energy from the Gulf and leaves that trail of blue right behind it. So hurricanes are one way the ocean can pick up energy from the atmosphere picks up energy from the sea, humidity and heat, and carries it onto land. And I just want to show you one more slide, this one here. And a steady state, so you have hurricanes that happen every so often. Every single day there's a global conveyor belt. Red is our currents of hot water, blue is deep water, cold water, and that's constantly moving heat around the planet. The reason Europe, over here in the upper right, think about Northern Europe, Ireland, you know, is nice and green, it's the green country. Southwestern Ireland, there's palm trees. You go across Northern Europe, it's nice and green and farmlands. You go come across the Atlantic at the same latitude, and that's Labrador. Not a lot grows there at all. So a lot of what's happening there, that heat and humidity is brought by the ocean right up here, and then it's exchanged with the atmosphere to carry it onto land. One of the things we worry about is these heating systems. If you've got hot water heating in your house, you know that if you start messing with the flow, upstairs gets cold real quick. It's called abrupt climate change. And one of the things that we worry about is we're keeping an eye on things like this Gulf Stream to make sure that it's still healthy. If it starts to break down, Europe can go into a mini ice age very quickly. It can start in 20 years, it can last 100 years or more, and it's happened in the past. Well, I don't want to leave you with something gloomy, so about ice ages and things like that. So I want to share with you some of the work done by a friend of mine. He's from the Marine Biological Lab, which is a neighboring institution. He studies octopus camouflage, cephalopod camouflage, and here's an octopus. My friend's Roger Hanlon, and this octopus is trying to hide from Roger against that coral reef, which is different color, different texture. So in order to do that, he's got to hide his tentacles, he's got to change color and texture, and voila, there he goes. Pretty good. Squid, and this is interesting, this is a species of squid. That guy on the bottom is an aggressive male, white in color. So white means stay away, but when there's a female around, he splits his color right down the middle, so she only sees Mr. Nice Guy. Pretty tricky. And notice when they switch position, he changed his color. So let's do that one more time. So here he is, brown on the right side. He says, oh no, she's sliding over this way. So he steps to the back. I'll be right back, dear. Zip, changes color, and comes back up the other side. Now, some people tell me that's called being two-faced, and it's not just squid. I don't know what that means. Cuttlefish, again, Roger Hanlon, he does the most fascinating research. Here's a cuttlefish that's going to try to hide in the background, and he's got to change color, but he's also got these tentacles to worry about, so watch what he does. He goes back into the rocks, changes color, and voila. Okay, so just crinkles up his tentacles. Why do they do it? One of the obvious reasons is to avoid being eaten, predators like the barracuda and other things. But it's just amazing because these animals have to know what they look like to you. You know, what's the best camouflage pattern to look so they can hide in that background. And here's a great case, and this is Roger's most famous one, I think, to date. I encourage you to go look at him on the website, Roger Hanlon. So here he comes. There's some algae up here, some white backgrounds, and here comes Roger. Voila. That's his eye right there, the octopus, and once he realizes he's been seen, scoots off into the distance. Roger paddling up behind, catches up to him, and then the octopus tries to bluff by making himself, didn't fool Roger, but making his eye spot really big. So we'll run that backwards and just watch this large, smooth-skinned, light-colored animal. It's hard to believe that that animal on the right, that's his eye right there, can turn into this stuff on the left. And it happens that fast. And there, because this is slow motion, there he goes, gone. Okay, just amazing. So, a world, this is where we began, this is where we'll end, our planet, something we take for granted in the past. There's a quote I want to leave you with by Marcel Proust. It's the true voyage of exploration is not so much in seeking new landscapes, which we do, but also in having new eyes. And to us in the oceanographic world, technology gives us new eyes. And I'm hoping by sharing that with you today, some of these images from our world, that you can now look at this planet, look at our ocean, and start thinking about it differently. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
What can we do?
You can find a spot over here. I'll invite the rest up. Thank you, Dr. Gallo, for that wonderful view of our Earth and the incredible journey to the undersea world. At this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to come join us up front at the table, and our moderator, Dr. Carlin, to come up. And while they're coming up, I'll remind folks about how we do the question and answer period here at the Nobel Conference. We have 3 different ways you can submit questions. And while we're gathering your questions, we'll be asking the panelists to think about questions they will ask Dr. Gallo, and they get first dibs. You can submit questions on the blue cards that the ushers have, and they'll pass them out and then collect them when you're done writing on them, and they'll bring them to the front, and we'll try to get them into the queue to get asked. For those on the internet, you can submit questions either using Google Moderator or by sending us an email. A link to both of those is at the bottom of the page for the web streaming page. So check those out. Submit your questions, and we'll get started with our question and answer period in a short time.
You did a good job, but you're slightly looking up. Oh.
Ooh. Now if I put it in muted.
Test.
Hello.
Testing.
So if I asked you
I
to
can't
fully
hear.
explain
Hello.
why those
I don't hear myself.
rivers and those lakes
I don't hear
are
me.
responsive, how could that be?
Does anyone?
Yeah, okay.
Testing.
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 You have to mute it.
Testing.
Testing.
I don't hear myself.
Testing.
Testing.
1, 2, 3. 1.
Testing.
Okay.
One.
Testing.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Testing.
Okay.
Testing.
Well, I have a
Can you
question.
hear me?
I have a
Okay.
question. I'll ask him about
Me here.
how could these
Hello.
things be at the bottom of the sea where it's
Hello.
all, you know,
Maybe
the
I
rivers
do.
and lakes and things?
This asthmatic stuff has got to
I'm not
go.
sure I do.
But it's very
But do you hear yourself?
Yeah, that I think. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind getting their attention.
I don't really need to hear
now,
myself.
that's okay. 'Cause
Now I
you've got
do.
a podium.
Oh, now I got
think
it.
that
Oh, you
makes
do?
Oh, the scientist that tags. Oh,
How do you turn it on? I have a
I
partial
tried that.
water glass.
Chuck is gonna.
Testing.
okay.
You're on. Can hear you.
Organize us.
Yes.
That means
Well,
one.
Chuck is going to. We're letting questions accumulate for a minute or two here. Let everybody-
So I'm really so I met with the
And what will you ask of us?
guy that leads the advisory board.
Well, first of all, I will invite y'all to ask a question of your own. The very first question up from the audience is going to be about how carbon dioxide is absorbed from the air into the oceans. So, right?
Okay.
And so basically,
address that one.
any of you, you're all welcome to just raise your hand, catch my attention.
Okay, folks, please find a seat, and we'll get started with our question and answer period.
You're wondering whether we're getting anything. That's why. I'm listening in. Hey. You're getting a Nobel Prize.
All right. Hello, and welcome to the question and answer session, the first one for Nobel Conference 48. I would like to be the first person to say thank you to Dr. Gallo. It was a wonderful presentation. And we're going to start off with a few questions from our other panelists, the esteemed speakers that have joined us here at Nobel Conference 48. And I believe, Ove, you were first. You had a question.
Well, can I say one?
Oh, yes.
Is this a, you know, I really feel like you're part of my family now, so I expect you to protect me from this group up here.
And actually, this is it does bring up a point of order for this and for all the question and answer periods. Although obviously we are going to be speaking about the person who just gave a wonderful presentation, you can ask any of the panelists anything, and the panelists are welcome to chime in, or maybe if the question's too hard, fob it off on someone else that they want to have that answer. So it is truly supposed to be a panel discussion. So Ove, would you like to start us off?
Well, I was fascinated by those rivers and lakes at the bottom of the sea, and so I had really two questions. One was, how can that be, given we're already wet? Right? And the second thing is, how permanent are they? Are they a feature? Are they like a waterfall that's there for hundreds of years, or?
Sure. Well, I think so much of it, the motion of water is controlled by a couple of things. One is winds, of course, can drive water. So when we're talking about rivers, we're very familiar with currents at the surface, for instance. What we're less familiar with is that when water gets colder, for instance, the Gulf Stream is warm water from the equator, heads up the east coast, gets up into near Ireland, and starts to release its heat and humidity to the atmosphere. So there's evaporation that leaves behind salty, colder water, and that water wants to sink. The same way if you pour cold cream into a hot cup of coffee, it'll go right to the bottom of the cup. So it's a density issue. Part of it, temperature, a big part of it. In the case of these things, salinity too. They do persist for quite a while. I mean, those brine pools, I don't know enough about them, how long the lakes, the pools are around. But we do see them in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're starting to see them in the Mediterranean too. Both places that we know have very large salt deposits on the bottom. In terms of the underwater waterfalls, I think, the oceans are constantly changing, so they're getting wider, there's volcanic activity, so there's always some change going on. But they seem like those currents persist for an awful long time. When you get something like the Gulf Stream, or the California current, or the Kushiro current, or the Brazil current, that they persist a long while. The surface ones, again, we're familiar with. The deep water ones, where it flows across the bottom and waterfalls, we're just not so familiar with, but there they are. One of the things that we don't quite understand is how you can have such a crisp boundary. That you look, and maybe some of the other panelists know, but it's just a perfectly crisp interface between, it's like oil and water together, that there it is.
With ripples.
Yes, with ripples. And in fact, one of the pilots told me that on that lake, they tried to, like good explorers, they landed on one of these pools, tried to go in, and it was too dense, so the submarine wasn't dense enough to sink. And then they lifted off, and after some moments, minutes even, they looked back down at the surface, and even though there were ripples, they could still see the imprint of the submarine on the surface of those lakes. So like a gelatin or something, very odd. Yeah.
Our next question is, how exactly does the ocean absorb carbon dioxide from the air?
Well, how exactly, when there's an exchange of gases between the two, how exactly it happens is you're right at the cutting edge of science now, understanding gas exchange. In fact, did any of the panelists go better? Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Yes, the man that does it. Yes, that's right.
There'll be a whole talk about that tomorrow. Yeah. I invite you all to come back tomorrow morning.
But in general, is it safe to say that the oceans are absorbing? I've heard a third. I've heard a little bit more of the.
Right. Right now we believe that it's purely a passive process, as it's just a simple law of thermodynamics and physics that as you increase the concentration of any gas over a body of liquid, that gas will naturally diffuse into that body of liquid. And we feel that right now that's the primary process, but there are lots of subtleties to that, and there's a lot of variability. For example, you mentioned the Gulf Stream that warms up or brings the warm water up north. As it's moving north, that water is cooling down.
Right.
Cold water holds more carbon dioxide than warm water. So that Gulf Stream, as it's cooling down, is absorbing massive amounts of carbon dioxide. As it gets up off Iceland, Greenland, it gets so cold that it sinks down into the bottom of the ocean. We can actually see the man-made CO2 all the way at the bottom of the ocean at your 2.5,
So you can go
3
down at
miles
the bottom of the waterfall, measure the water, and it's loaded with CO2.
Exactly. So you've got a little waterfall of carbon dioxide right there going into the deep.
That's what I love. The planet really does work. I mean, it mystifies us sometimes when you get into the complexity, but when you step back and look at the simple things, if you do this and this A, B, then C should happen, and there it does. It's fascinating that way at a large scale.
We have a question from Twitter. How has your research influenced the way you see the world?
For me?
Yes.
Yeah. I have, again, because of my, one way to call it's ADD or curiosity, I get excited and interested in a lot of things. From this morning it was tomatoes. So what it's made me, it really has made me, and I really want badly just to not go on the next expedition as much as I want to sit back and think about all the things that I've been privileged to be part of and to see and to be in the company of people doing fascinating research. What it makes me realize, just like when I had that revelation looking at reading Kon-Tiki or in the shoe department, was that there's so much more to know, that we don't know all the answers and there's so much more left to be done. And that also I've come to realize the power of curiosity, that if you can follow your own curiosity, it's a powerful, powerful driving force. So I think appreciation is more. I also get frustrated when I see some of the human behavior. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me in light of, I don't know how much more we need to know about how sensitive our environment is to change and how it comes back to impact us before we start taking action.
I have a follow-on question to that. So you keep talking about our need to explore, how very little of the deep ocean that we've actually seen, and yet you also talk about the vastness of the ocean. There's tens of thousands of miles of these mountains that you've discussed. What is your vision for how can we possibly explore that in an effective way when it's very remote, very difficult to get to?
I don't think we'll ever get there with the present, most right now, all of that research is being done through governmental funding. National Science Foundation, NOAA, a little bit, National Institute of Health, Office of Naval Research. What I do see emerging are individuals, billionaires, quote unquote, super affluent, but very serious about understanding Earth's environment, that have the resources to build, instead of 1 or 2 robots or 1 or 2 submarines, fleets of vehicles, with the intent that they want to find a way to cover large amounts of the ocean in shorter periods of time. And I'm on the advisory board of X Prize Foundation, and I know that that's one of the goals, is how do we, let's find the radical breakthrough. Because the issues with the ocean, we don't have GPS. We can't use that because radio waves don't penetrate the ocean, so no GPS, no communications. So there's no radio communications. It's done with sound usually or through a cable. So navigation's an issue, power's an issue. We have to bring our own power for the most part. Lights, all the things you've come to be familiar with up here under the sun normally don't apply beneath the sea. And we don't have maps to begin with, so we're mapping these incredibly complicated areas with no maps. So I think that in the future we're going to see, I think, a sudden burst of new vehicles, swarms of vehicles, long endurance vehicles, rapidly deployable vehicles in the next 5 or 10 years. That'll cover a lot more terrain. If you do the math, it turns out you can actually map quite a bit of the seafloor in a decade's time if you put your mind to it.
I have a question that's related. I have a question that's related to the one that came in on Twitter to follow up. So much of your language is the language of wonder and mystery. You talk about the mystical world underneath the Caribbean abyss, and you talk about this amazing, and it's surprising and startling. So I wonder about the relationship between wonder in your work and knowledge, which may be thought of as to nibble away against the realm of wonder. Would you talk about the play?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely got the right job at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Director of Special Projects, because in many ways, and this is maybe the wrong word, and I hope no one's listening from back there, but I get to dabble a little bit in different areas. And in some ways, you could accuse me of picking off all the exciting stuff and not focusing in like a scientist needs to do. In hindsight, my teacher said that you don't have the aptitude to be a scientist, which for a long time that bothered me, and I'll show you. In actuality, because science is so rigorous, so disciplined, so focused, that probably they were right. Didn't mean that I couldn't enjoy exploration or be part of this thing called science, but the actual process of science, of carrying that brick to the pyramid, of making that contribution, and I did that for many years, is a very different kind of thing than just getting excited and emotional about stuff. Yeah. But more and more, I find scientists, and I bet all of you, as you're speaking, that bit of emotion will come out in you that you can't help but be, here's just the facts without getting excited about the facts. So, Is that good?
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry. I would like to make sure that question from our high school students present gets asked. Do you think that we humans can change the bottom of the ocean in a way that benefits humans and other life like us?
Sure. I mean, I think we've done the opposite for sure. Deep water trawling and the like. We've changed the seascape in many ways, physically and chemically and other ways. I honestly do believe that if we set our minds to it, that we can do whatever we need to do. The trick is to balance the fact. You can't study something forever. Is to figure out what you want to do, understand the consequences fully. And one of the questions that have come up in the past couple of days is drilling in the Arctic. Is that something that we're for or against? Or, that's not the purview normally of scientists to decide if that's what we should or shouldn't do. What we should be doing is putting on the table all the facts, the consequences. This could happen, that could happen. Here's what's going on. And so in that case, yeah, I think we can do whatever we need to do as long as we decide to do it. You have to have the will and the confidence and do it. Yeah.
And then I saved, I'm sorry for my personal bias here, but I think I saved the best question for last. A member of the audience has written, currently, I work at Foot Locker. Do you have a spot for me on your next expedition?
Yay, sure. Yeah. That's a great one. Hey, Foot Locker's great. Foot Locker's great. You know what? I'll tell you what. What you need to do, like anybody else, if you get the bug, you look on the web. That's a wonderful thing. You start pestering people. You know, I'm really interested in what you do. Community colleges, this college, especially here, holy smoke, what a resource to have in your own backyard. Gustavus Adolphus College. I am more than mystified by what I've found here so far. But so you have all these avenues in. It's not just a matter of calling up, hey, I want to go on an expedition. But there are entryways, you know, you just have to, and I think it's the same rules when I talk to some of my friends, focus, persistence, and you got to work your tail off. You know, you really do have to work your tail off. So.
Can I just add to that? For undergraduates, all the major oceanographic institutions and I'm sure lots of other places run these summer internship programs, and those are actually great opportunities for undergraduates to get a taste of oceanographic research and often go to sea. And in fact, that's how I got into the field, is I did a summer undergraduate intern at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So I really encourage anyone who's interested, thinks this might appeal to them, to apply to one of those summer programs, and they're well funded. You get paid to go there, and you have a great time. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh no, Will, please.
No, just two things. First, this was awesome. I've been in oceanography a long time, and I just want to re-up, so to speak. That was a beautiful.
Thank you.
But as you were presenting that, it's in the way in which it's so stimulating. So you showed briefly the abundant life associated with hydrothermal vents.
Sure.
And I think you said that around the Titanic, there's abundant life. Mm-hmm. And the Titanic has iron.
Right.
And so it's being oxidized.
Yes.
And iron oxidizing bacteria are operating there.
Eating the hull, yep.
Eating the hull and supplying the carbon, possibly.
Yep.
Did I answer my own question? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm hoping you don't go any further, because
I was curious, because that's the connection I was making in my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the beauty of Titanic is we know within a few moments of when that hit the bottom. So it's this wonderful time marker. So, and now some studies have been done, but the real rigorous studies, I think, about exactly what's happening to that hull. There's other shipwrecks of the same era that aren't that way, which is peculiar. So it's that one spot in the ocean that, so the idea is that, you know, we thought with bodies on Titanic that they don't last long on the deep sea floor. Flesh gets eaten, gruesome, yes, bones dissolve. But even the ship itself, there's microbes attacking the hull itself and saying, oh, this is great, munch, 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 munch. And those microbes then provide the basis for a whole nother communities of life on the bottom. So, and again, I have to tell you, we're talking about pure basic exploration. We do not know in many places what we're going to find. So that's a statement, but also a challenge to those of you that are interested in the field, that it's wide open. We're talking 90 some odd, and I don't even know what that number means, but it's just a wide open field.
Dave, if you could have one piece of new equipment to explore the open oceans, what would it be?
Oh, well, it sounds hokey, but a submarine big enough where we could take everybody into that deep world. Maybe someone will build that for me. No, it would be, a long-term like the Nautilus would be awesome, that you could just go for long periods of time. But you know, again, and I feel like I've been privileged enough, been out to sea enough, been part of enough expeditions, been in the company of some of the most amazing people, men, women, engineers, scientists, that and crew that keeps you alive out there, that I'm looking forward to sitting back and just pondering what all these privileges and all the wonderful things. So I've got one or two more expeditions left in my head, but that's about it.
All right. Well, I would like to thank our panelists, and especially Dr. Gallo. You can meet Dr. Gallo briefly as we leave the stage. He'll be around to answer a few questions, although we have armed Gustavus students with the fortitude to make sure he gets to use the bathroom at some point today. So thank you very much.